Okay,
Lord have mercy.
so moving on to our next topic, the Gavin Newsom recall
Oh.
efforts. Now, I want to point out that um, I vividly remember when Governor Gray Davis was recalled over, if I recall, might have been vehicle registration fees, and we brought in the governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and by the time he left his 2-term assignment, we were deep in debt. So I sincerely hope that Gavin. I don't like Gavin Newsom. I think he's not doing enough to aid our to provide for us in the middle of this pandemic. But at the same time, it's like I know for a fact my gut is telling me that the Republicans essentially want to bring in someone who'll turn us into Texas. So yeah, around the horn, thoughts on the recall effort?
So the reason
Oh,
I
sorry.
wanted to talk about this was because I find it really interesting because obviously Republicans are leading this effort.
Mhm.
Um, and like, I don't like Gavin Newsom, but like the question of should we recall Gavin Newsom to me is like, well, recall him and replace him with who? Like, obviously these Republicans have the idea of like replacing him with a Republican. And obviously like, I'm not super on board with that.
Doesn't he
Um,
have to go to a vote?
well, that's the thing is it looks like they're tracking to get it to a recall, which would mean first, I think we vote on if I think actually it's the same ballot. We vote on if we recall, and if so, who do we replace them with?
Mhm.
Mm.
And just in general, though, I think I'm just not a fan of recalls in general because to me it's just like, I mean, I don't know when his term is up, but why not just uh, vote him out? And I feel kind of similarly towards like with the Cuomo stuff, I do think he should resign and like you know, I think he's a terrible person. But like I don't necessarily understand the efforts to go so hard for like getting people out as opposed to just being like just vote him out then.
Yeah. So a little bit of insight into this. If I recall my California, I took a course about California government and politics way back in Cal Poly, and if I recall, California stands alone as if not the only direct democracy, but certainly the biggest direct democracy state in this country. So that's why any proposition needs to gather signatures. Any legislation can either be sourced from the people or as opposed to being proposed by our representatives. And I believe that's why we also have the recall effort instead of impeachment. Like what's going on in New York with Governor Cuomo, they would have to impeach him if he's not going to resign. Here in California, we have the recall effort, and if I also recall, to get the recall effort on the ballot, you have to reach half of the number of signatures based on how many people voted in the last gubernatorial election. So you need half of the number of those signatures to get the recall on the ballot. And then you would vote on either do we want to retain Governor Newsom or do we want to replace him immediately with somebody else? And I
Also, I
have
don't think there's any way he's gonna not pass the recall vote.
you'd be
Personally,
Well,
but
no, that's the problem is that a recall election is sort of like I believe something to take note of is that Governor Schwarzenegger won with around 35% of the vote, if I recall,
okay.
because there were 4 candidates in the race last time around,
Mm-hmm.
2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And I believe, it's sort of like functions in those old rules where we're in like, oh, the second person becomes the lieutenant governor and something along those lines. It's a different form of election, which makes it a lot more difficult to just sort of pass it on to the Democrats. You're going to have a chance that if there is a significant splintering of the vote, like there was in 2004, of a potentially popular Republican coming through and actually gaining a plurality.
so this
Right.
is basically the Republicans trying to trick us into electing a Republican governor.
Well, here's the problem. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger was a freaking movie star, so
Mhm.
people gave him a chance because they're sitting there going like, what's the worst he can do? And he managed to get a plurality of the vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he had the kavorka, he had charisma, the kind of charisma to where people, went along with it basically.
So it's actually a very if there is not really a sense of unity on the Democratic side, if you've got more than one Democrat running, those could be the factors that lead to a Republican somehow ending up as governor of California. But then again, the state's changed a great deal in
Yeah.
17 years.
But I think that's the dynamic that makes it interesting to me, is that you have a lot of progressives and leftists who don't like Newsom, and I think as a knee jerk would like the idea of recalling him. I think I'm kind of in that camp. And
Well,
so,
yeah,
and I feel like,
yeah.
so the question is, should we be giving this thought in terms of like, I think we should tread very carefully here, because what might look like a tempting thing to do could end up, we could end up with a Republican governor. So I just think it's important that
so-
we're mindful about how we handle this.
So I feel differently about this. First of all, Gavin Newsom vetoed the ranked choice vote. And for that, he is forever on my shit list. Like, I do want him out for that reason alone. I don't need any other reasons. Ranked choice voting would fix a lot of problems. There's even better forms of voting, like star voting, easier to understand. Anything's better than this first past the post manipulation that has been done to the idea of democracy in our country. That said, honestly, I really think we need to just take removing assholes from power as our win. If you get enough people that are just losing their jobs, and let's say it even becomes a whole new thing where they perfect some method of being able to get people from the other party in when someone's pushed out. The point is that the people voted and won the opportunity to get rid of a stupid asshole who should never have been in power to begin with. As long as we can show that and prove that to the people, we're going to have their votes coming back for more. And when we just put ourselves in the role of running for election and being able to get noticed in spite of the media being against us, then we'll get progressives in. We'll get people that are better than both of these shit for brains parties. And it just means we need to overrun and override. It doesn't, if we keep showing caution, like I respect where you're coming from, David, but if we keep showing caution and go, oh, but the other, this piece of shit's a bigger piece of shit, and I'm so worried that they might win it and be a bigger piece of shit, and it could be worse. That's how they hold us down. It's fear.
I think what I really, I hear your point. I think what I'm really thinking is, like, I feel like the left should probably be like being very strategic right now in terms of, like, I don't know, getting a candidate ready, or like just being ready to have like a unified front so that we don't end up with that worse outcome. Because I just think it seems like the more we leave up to happenstance, it just seems like happenstance always gonna like lead to a bad road, in my opinion. Because the way the stage is tilted in politics. And so I just think this is something that leftists should be trying to think about and be strategic about.
I would like to add here that I'm more inclined to what David is saying, and I want to point out is that any sort of what you could call a insurgent vote that would be aligned or otherwise identifying with leftist or progressive causes, we don't have that presence here in California. I mean, our Revolution LA, we're a small group, and the next biggest group, in fact, the biggest progressive group out there, the DSA, I mean, they don't have that kind of leverage, actually. I sincerely believe that as much as I might, nobody here likes Gavin Newsom, but unfortunately, like I said, progressives don't have leverage. They don't have as big of an influence as we think we do. So for us to support any kind of recall cause, essentially, in my estimation, it's like cutting off your nose to spite your face. I sincerely believe that.
I'm sorry, but how do you expect we're going to get power and influence if we're just going to keep backing off when there's the slightest like
That's what I wanted
risk.
to. Well, that's what I wanted to bring up. I think progressives, leftists and progressives, would be better served building opposition on the local, the city, the city and the county levels, and just kind of amassing because y- y- I think to take the shot at the governor's office would be a little bit too premature. I think we need to grow something organic on the ground level because a recall election is really quick compared to a proper gubernatorial election, and like I said, I don't think that we have the means to make that shot. And if we do end up making that shot, it's just going to blow up in our faces, I believe.
Yeah, I'd like to, you know, oddly enough, I really do agree with Steve on this matter. If folks remember to like just to the recent primary, the Democratic primary, progressives took the state. Progressives took this state in the Democratic primary. This is a progressive state. The infrastructure is there. We just need to look to the Bernie campaign. They managed to mobilize voters across this country, and if you count in the people freaking who are near progressives, like those who voted for Warren and all this such, you have a phenomenal springboard from which you can actually take statewide power. So I understand that the idea is to build local power, and that's where your communities can be affected the most. But we can have ambitions in this state. This isn't freaking Wyoming. This isn't Florida. This isn't a swing. This is a solid blue state. You can actually accomplish these things here.
Well, the reason why I have this perspective is that I served as a Bernie victory campaign during the 2020 election, and let me tell y'all, if I became so disillusioned, that's the big reason why I wrote that investigation into allegations of abuse within the California state campaign. Basically, like I have it's the ground volunteers. And maybe and I would say most of like the field organizers, they were in it for the cause, but the higher level campaign the higher ups within the California state campaign, they were essentially like staffers and had this kind of mercenary they were almost entirely mercenary basically. So it's what I'm trying to get at is that if we were to put up this insurgent Bernie style state campaign, um if the last time we tried it was said anything, it's that I really do believe that we'd end up like I don't think we'd want. I think that we'd find ourselves in another situation with mercenary people leading us, basically.
If
And
if the DSA can do it in Nevada, you can do it here.
But that was progress. Like Bernie didn't win the primary, but we got a lot of progress out of his movement.
I get you, but I mean, maybe I just have a grudge. I mean, Chuck Rocha can go burn in hell as far as I'm concerned, and his Latino outreach was what got Bernie that huge tide of votes here in California and Nevada. At the same time, he's a grifter, if anything. So, um, I'll say this, I'm gonna wait and see. I'm gonna have a wait and see approach. If progressives do decide to mount an insurgent campaign, and if there does seem to be movement in that direction, then by all means, go for it. But
So, so Ruben, you say you remember a recall election that do you remember voting in it?
oh, you got to understand, the last
And
recall
Isaac,
election was with was what Arnold Schwarzenegger
It was
brought
grade
in
8. It was like in
2000.
2003 or 4.
Yeah, I
so
was
do
a
you remember how it works? Like the same, you get a ballot that says, should we recall? And then if so, with whom? Is that how it
Well,
works? Or
y'all
are
have
those
y'all have to
separate?
understand. My parents weren't eligible to vote, so I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
see any kind of ballots going on. I just remember vividly, like the
It was in the news. Like,
it
everybody's
was in the
talking
news
about it.
everywhere, and of course, the governor rising to power and all that kind of stuff. Like I have those vivid memories, but I was way too young to even conceive of the idea of voting or politics, basically. So
I'd like to correct myself before moving forward. He didn't achieve 35% of the vote. He achieved around like 48 or something along those lines. He's still the idea still holds true. He had a plurality, not a majority, because the Republican vote was split.
yeah,
Nonetheless, yeah, small correction on my part.
You mean the Democrat vote was split?
No. The Republican vote. There were 2 Republican candidates.
Oh, and was there a Democrat
There was a Democrat, yeah.
and he just wasn't.
He didn't make it across the line. Arnold actually just performed very well his first time
Yeah.
around. Very
So-
well.
So yeah, let's
Wait.
I shouldn't speak as the group, but I think it'd be best that we just wait and see if like this is only only efforts are being made to get the recall.
It does look like
started.
they're tracking though. And the reason I brought it up was because I read in the press recently. It does look like they're
Gotcha.
tracking to get the recall. So it's just going
Okay.
to be a question of how that
Okay.
pans out.
Just one thing that I also want to say before we move on is I want you to remember that what happened with Bernie in the last year, Biden chose to risk Trump becoming president so as to prevent Bernie from becoming president. Bernie was winning. He was ahead in the polls. And then Biden pulled his bullshit where he, behind closed doors, made agreements, probably promised Kamala Harris the VP position, and made other concessions behind closed doors to get them to endorse. And then that was what overwhelmed the Bernie campaign. And not only that, trying to declare victory as soon as there was any bit of a lead by the media, that was what did it. So what I'm saying is, keep in mind that the whole campaign, Biden was, we can't let Trump win. We can't let Trump win. Trump's a bigger piece of shit. He's a bigger piece of shit than me. Don't vote for Trump. Vote for me because I'm not as big of a piece of shit as he is. Meanwhile, yes, Biden, you're a fucking piece of shit because you, as much as you hate Trump, decided he's not as bad as your close friend Bernie. And then that's where Bernie fucked up, is even identifying that psychopath as a friend. It's just it's outright stupid on all fronts. But my point being, this is how they control us, with the fear that we have to always choose between douche versus turd sandwich every fucking election.
Yeah,
And we
Real
have
South
to say
Park
we have
hours.
standards of neither. Go in and write abstain. Write in abstain. Do that in mass, and we will fuck them up because they can't ignore that in the polls. They can't say you're crazy because you chose to abstain and make it publicly noteworthy that you chose to abstain.
My abstention was a vote for the Green candidate, but I mean, like in any case, I think that if progressives don't seize the day, then what's the point? Them sitting around and waiting for incremental change or something. Be the change. Seize. If you're going to work through the Democratic Party, do what they did in Nevada. Take control of the party structure. Do what you can.
Mhm.
I mean, like, we have the opportunity to actually, in some of these blue states like California, be the template for what we want to replicate throughout the country.
I would like to. I think David, unless you have any closing thoughts on this matter.
I think my closing thoughts on this are, I'm kind of like a both sider when it comes to issues like this, in the sense that I do agree that progressives and leftists and socialists, we need to do a better job of not being afraid to challenge power and stand up to them and be like, we're not scared of you and we're not scared of how you're going to fearmonger. But at the same time, I'm not a sort of person who wants to go bull in the china shop, mostly because I know people like me won't fare well in an apocalyptic setting. But I just think it's important to balance sort of like strategy and playing the game with also being not afraid to go up to power and say, I'm not scared of you, I'm not backing down. And I think we've seen that with the Progressive Caucus now and their sort of refusal to weaponize their votes on anything. Because it's like, yeah, I think you can say they can't weaponize their votes to pass their whole entire agenda. Like that would never work. But to say like, no, like here's one thing, we're not backing down and we're weaponizing our votes. So what are you going to do? So again, I just think, so relating it back to Gavin Newsom, I just think, to me, it's just like I'm concerned because it looks like we could potentially be headed for replacing Gavin Newsom with a Republican, and I'm definitely not on board with that. But at the same time, like Steve said, like, yeah, I haven't forgiven him for vetoing ranked choice voting, which would have helped in this issue. So it was clearly strategic to protect his own power. So I'm definitely not a Gavin Newsom fan. I definitely would love to see him, have to leave office, but I would just like to see a strategy around it.
You know what? I'm on the recall Newsom train now. I'm like, just get rid of the guy and launch a progressive campaign, because I mean, think about it. 35% of the vote. Frankly speaking, a Democrat will probably win either way, even if there is a split.
Sorry, but I have just one thought here. A thought experiment I think could be done to just clarify a further point here. Ask yourself, if the two evils on the table were Republicans and you had to choose between which public Republican was the bigger piece of shit to not vote for, and then make sure you vote for the other guy because it's just one or the other, would you then have a line in the sand standard where you're like, fuck them both, I'm not voting for either?
There definitely has to be a line in the sand. And I think to me that test, like in the primary, came when Michael Bloomberg entered the race. And I was like, I know they're not about to tell us to vote for Michael Bloomberg.
And my closing
but
thoughts.
I agree there needs to be a line in the sand. I just think ultimately that line is in different places for different people.
Fair.
My closing thoughts on this matter is this, it's not that I don't have my issue here is that I personally don't have faith in whoever could call themselves a progressive politician. I still kind of have a grudge towards Bernie, and I know that's a little irrational, but also, I mean, we could apply this to like look at AOC. Like she ran on universal health care. She ran on all these frankly what's considered radical here in this country. But ever since then, like, she's taken the idea of Medicare for all. She's kind of dropped that. In fact, now she's pushing for COBRA subsidies. So, I mean, if we had a candidate here in California, a progressive candidate who I could trust frontwards and backwards, I would say, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. But at this point, I don't know of anybody, and I quite honestly don't have faith that anybody would do a better job of it. Maybe not so much a better job of it, but anybody could take on Gavin Newsom, and not just take on Gavin Newsom, but also do everything in their power to provide for our material interests, basically. So I don't want to come off as if it's the lesser of two evils. It's more like, or the devil that it's like, I don't know. I'm a little down on it right now. But in any case, I do encourage every single person who's listening here, if you're part of a progressive movement, if you are a DSA member like myself, please do bring this up and pressure them into saying like, hey, are we going to where are we going on this issue, basically? Because progressive movements do have influence in this state, and just get out there, basically. Now